David is rightly celebrated as a man of great faith, the kind of faith that could and did slay giants. I always need to add, when I speak of David's great faith, that David was a man of true faith in a time of great idolatry. Because in pre-exilic Israel, idols were everywhere. And though the Israelites may have worshipped God, they had a lot going on the side too. But not David. David exclusively worshiped the God of Israel. Well, having delighted in the power and the wonder of David's faith, I suppose many of us have asked at times, Lord, I have faith. How come I don't seem to be slaying the giants in my life? All those fears and those persistent troubles that I keep thinking I can finally defeat, they persist. The great thing about studying David is we see not only great faith, but we see strategies and wisdom, which knows how to take that faith and to harness it and to use it and to apply it to life. We learn in David's strategies of faith. Strategy almost seems too slick a word to use from the pulpit. Maybe you've heard some great charismatic preachers speak of strategies for living. And oftentimes here's someone so full of themselves and confident that we think, well, he seems to have a strategy for his life, but it never really seems to apply to ours. Or strategies for living might sound like some business seminar as well, that we always have trouble fully grasping, let alone applying. But here in David, we're talking about real strategies, simple and effective. Oh, we believe in faith and we believe in prayer and we believe in hard work, but these are strategies which take us beyond that. I want to look today at 3 different dynamics of this story. Oh, we could look at a lot more, for this story is so rich. But I want us to consider David and how he slew giants and how we can as well. Now, just a little background here. The Philistine army and the army of Israel had met, and they had drawn a battle line. And as was commonly done in ancient times, the Philistines put forth a champion. This was their greatest fighter. Let the battle begin fighting this great champion. And then the opposing army was to put forth a champion of their own. Well, the Philistine champion was so intimidating that all the Israelites could do was cower in fear. So for days, indeed weeks, Goliath would strut and boast and curse the gods of Israel. Well, David appears. David was not in the army. He was the youngest and home tending the sheep. But his father sent them with supplies for his brothers who were in the army. Well, David came and he was horrified to hear the God of Israel being cursed in this way. And he immediately decided he was going to step forward and be the one to slay this giant. Everyone around him was horrified, not knowing what else to do. They sent him to Saul. And so appearing before Saul, well, Saul was really embarrassed by this whole situation. Some might say perhaps Saul should have stepped forward. He was a mighty warrior. But this young shepherd steps forward, and Saul pleads with him. Saul said to David, "You're not able to go against this Philistine to fight with him, for you are just a boy, and he has been a warrior from his youth." Well, David heard this. He waited. But then David had his own perspective. David said, "The Lord who saved me from the paw of the lion and from the paw of the bear will save me from the hand of this Philistine. I've been shepherd and I faced the lion and the bear. God gave me strength to conquer them. This will be no different." David had a strategy, and it goes like this. The victories of his past would be a forecast and a sign of the victories God wanted him to accomplish in the future. And moving upward from significant victory to yet greater victory. I've handled a bear. I've handled a lion. I can handle this Philistine. I ask you people to consider this day, what lions and bears have you slain? What life experiences do you carry? We live in a day and age where we look a lot to institutions of higher learning, and we need a teacher for the junior high kids. Well, I haven't been to college. I haven't studied education. I haven't. And we act as if there's some magic college out there where you take the class and pulling together and teaching a junior high Sunday school class, whereafter you become a genius and can handle it for everybody else. And then we spend the rest of our time mocking colleges and college graduates because they're not as smart as they think they are. We play silly games. But the truth of it is, God's given us all educations in thousands of ways and thousands of experiences that prepare us for things like that. What educations, what victories have you encountered along the way? I just think for a moment of athletics, the military, home life, dealing with kids, the work world, problem solving in all kinds of places. Sunday school, both as a student and as a teacher and leader. What hardships has God brought you through in life? These are victories. And our pouches, our knapsacks, shall we say, are full of them. And where do those victories lead us? To what next step might they be inviting us? I wasn't here when Lunch with Luke started. That was a few years before my arrival. But I can imagine the thoughts that were going through people's heads. Gee, should we really be doing this? We don't know what we're doing. And then on the other hand, well, wait a minute. I fed a family for years. I fed big family events. We've put on dinners here at the church. We've been hospitable and invited strangers in. Wait a minute, we can do this. And it'll start small, and it did. From the lion and the bear to greater things. And last time we were up to about 120 people a week. Lord willing, we'll be there again soon. What experiences has God given us in the past that we can step up to the next? This sounds a lot like stewardship time, I know, but consider the gifts we've been given. How can we now use them for God? Not store them away, not make them a mere memory. Sometimes we have certain accomplishments in life, and it's great to have accomplishments in life. It gives us a sense of satisfaction. Sometimes we stick them in a trophy case when we need to be pulling them out and using those experiences for the next step and the next step up. Right now we're looking for people to help with our Vacation Bible School. I've just mentioned a junior high teacher. None of us here have ever dealt with young people or children, have we? I guess we don't know how to do that, do we? Now, if I really pressed that point, I would be reviled, and rightly so, because we do have experience. Oh, but I can't teach. I don't know, Vacation Bible School. Well, why not? You've handled one set of lions and bears. There's another set waiting. You know how to do that. And God's brought us through that. And we can step up. We can take the next step. David's first faith strategy was stepping up from one victory to the next and seeing God's guiding and training hand in that. Secondly, David knew how to fight, and he always stuck with the right weaponry. I love that. Saul, deeply concerned for this young man, because Saul thought that this is not going to end well. Saul just, I'm sure there was gloom, was just dwelling in his heart in abundance at that moment. And he gave David his armor, and he gave him his sword. He's kind of clunking around in this. He says, this is going to drag me down. It's not going to help me. And he thought of the equipment he used against the lion and the bear. He said, no, this isn't my strong point. And he put it aside, and he went out with his own. He said, I cannot walk with these, for I'm not used to them. So David removed them. He would soon run down to the stream and get 5 smooth stones. And David's weapons were surprisingly effective. He went with that training he had received, with the weaponry he knew, and knowing that God was his strength, he called on the giant in the name of God. He said, you've cursed the God of Israel. You're about to get a lesson here from the God of Israel. And with a full and bold confidence, he spoke to the giant. The The battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hand. And just to make his demonstration of boldness complete, David ran to the battle line. David teaches us to fight with the weapons we have, to fight like Christians. Remember the weapons that we have, the sling and the stone, the items that the world might laugh about. But let's remember them. We are told to fight the spiritual battle with the proclamation of a risen Christ, with love, with prayer, for kindness, even in the face of hatred. Now, we don't always like that weapon. We think, well, isn't there something better than that? I know in my own lifetime, just watching how the church has tried to take hold of a lot of the weaponry of the world. Through the civil rights movement, in time there rose up something of what we might call a religious left. And we were trying very much as a church to influence the government, to make the right decisions about civil rights, and et cetera, et cetera. And every denomination had its Washington office, and we wanted to influence, and we wanted to see if we could get into the media, and we wanted to seize all the weapons of the world. Later on, the religious right would do that. And you know, it's hard to make sweeping statements. I suppose there are moments when we need to write to our congressman and do such things as citizenship requires, but we forget the real weaponry that we've been given. How are we going to win any battles with that? Especially in this technological age. Technology hasn't changed the gospel. And one person sharing Christ's love with another, that's the real battle. That's the real weaponry there. I guess to pick something of a neutral example here, I often think of the anti-smoking campaign. A bit of a secular illustration, but remember back in 65, I guess it was, the Surgeon General said, enough of this silliness. We've known smoking's no good for you for years, so the Surgeon General put out a report. Smoking's no good for you. And there was a lot of data behind it. You know, that was enough to get my dad to quit smoking. He figured, oh, they're right. It's time. He quit smoking. And information went out. As children, well, this is what a smoker's lung looks like. This is what a non-smoker's lung looks like. We'd say, holy smokes. Bad pun not intended. And we'd say, my goodness, I guess you don't want to do that. And then as we aged as a population, we knew this really catches up to you. And the truth went forward, and people changed. People responded to the truth. Now, it's always upset me about the anti-smoking campaign, that after a while, then they wanted to seize a hold of the courts, and they wanted to make tobacco companies pay, and then they wanted a lot of money coming in, and then they wanted the monies directed certain ways, and then they became just another political force in Washington. I liked it back when they had the truth, because the truth was working, rather than becoming a part of the nanny state that people can resent. We need to remember in a similar way, we carry the truth. That's our real weapon. The world laughs. Goliath laughed. And we know how that ended. Finally, not so much a strategy here, but just a dynamic of faith we need to remember. Faith is contagious. When the Philistines saw their champion was dead, they fled. And it was a rout that day. You know, the Philistines, up until about this time, were a major threat to the very existence of Israel. Now, there were a few great battles to come, but the tide was turning. And some years later, when David was king, the Philistines would be finally defeated and would never again be a threat to Israel. What a great victory David won. And his courage and his faith were contagious. We have contagious faith. I put in the bulletin today a poem about Father's Day. And the gist of it is that dads, you make such a difference. Moms do too. Truth is, we all do. The world is watching. Oh, I'm a nobody. Nobody cares what I do, blah, blah, blah. Oh, they do, and they're watching. And especially when you wear the name of Christ, people watch a little more. And by wearing the name of Christ, your witness and your positive witness can make all the difference in the world and can lift people's spirits. There are more people depending on you now emotionally than you would ever realize. And if you should let them down, what a tragedy that would be. I love that in the 73rd Psalm. The psalmist said about giving up on God. He said, life isn't fair. All the evil seem to flourish. And we get treated like dirt. Life is awful. Not a very encouraging psalm, is it? But he just poured it out to God. And he came to the point where he was ready to deny his faith. And he said, and then I thought about my children. I couldn't deny them. It would crush them. And it would destroy their faith. And he hung on a little longer until God would give him the answer. We need to be careful how we carry our faith and be good and bold witnesses of the Christian walk in faith. For many are depending upon us, and that faith is contagious, as well as our fall from faith would be contagious as well. We've come out of a year of not trying to infect anybody. Now I've got to start reversing that message. Oh, we need to be infecting people widely and deeply as we can. Well, folks, there are no shortage of giants out there to defeat. There are false gods. There's hatred and divisions. There are all sorts of troubles in our life which persist us like Goliath. But we have no shortage of battle experience. And we have the weapons. Happy hunting.